is Chloe Stanford. I am 17 years old and a grade 11 contemporary art student at Etobicoke School of the Arts. Until recently, I had a very different view of the art world. The ESA Contemporary Art program changed that and helped me to evolve my artistic process through its welcoming community. This is my art from 2017, and this is my art now. The difference between the two, other than the fact that one is pencil sketches and one is sculpture work made from my hair, is that the first was made only to improve my technique and skill in drawing, while the second was made as a way for me to express my connections to the world, and the work itself captures my vulnerability. Although both works are equally important in my artistic journey, I see more value in my art now because it is more evolved. It took me a long time to learn how to make art that will function in this way. I am not saying that technique and skill are not important. They are important in art making, but I find more value in my work when there is a deep personal connection, and the art from 2017 greatly lacks that. The journey from point A to point B and finding why I make art was by no means linear. I've broken up my journey into phases as a way for me to clearly see how I've evolved, and to function as a mostly straightforward path of how my current art came to be. As you can see, sometimes I like to be overly organized, but the phases will also benefit those of you viewing this art talk so that you know what the heck I am actually talking about. They range across my time at ESA, but as I mentioned earlier, this is not fully linear, and some do overlap quite a bit. The first phase of my journey in finding why I make art is my transition from middle school to ESA. In the first few months of grade 9, I faced a huge art block. I was making just enough work for the assignments I was given, but I barely did any work outside of class in my sketchbooks. An example of this is my common object assignment piece. I was able to make this huge mirror box, but I couldn't doodle in a sketchbook. As I look back, this was most likely due to the fact that I had just undergone an extreme change in the structural process of how I was told to make art. The structure of ESA art class was very different from what I was used to, and my idea of what I thought I would be doing at ESA was very different from reality. Not in a bad way, I was just caught off guard. After viewing the portfolio day the year before I applied, I gained this idea that I needed all my art to suddenly be fully conceptual and have meaning like most of the work I had seen. I struggled to comprehend how to get from where I was to where I thought I needed to be. This is what gave me an art block. All the work I made in my sketchbooks that weren't leading to some big, meaningful work felt meaningless and useless. Of course they aren't, but grade 9 me clearly thought so. The second phase of my journey started when I became more comfortable in the ESA environment. Still struggling with the meaning I thought I needed in my art, I continued to not make much work beyond the assignments, but I finally had an output that would help me work towards where I am now. I vividly remember the first class we did rapid writing. At the time, I was not a big fan of writing, and sometimes I still tell myself that, even though my journal is 90% writing, and it's not all to-do lists. We all sat down in the caf in our own little bubbles with a giant sheet of paper, 30 minutes, and a pen. I never imagined that I would fill up that entire sheet plus more with just writing. There was no prompt, so I just let my ideas flow. After that, I learned that writing is a great way to find new ideas for art and the meaning of pieces that I want to make. This sounds like it solved my meaning problem, right? Yes and no. I was able to make the assignments more easily and give my art some meaning, but the only writing I was doing was in search of that meaning. I was forcing my thoughts out, making anything I came up with extremely strained. This was not a very effective process. I really wanted to get where I thought I needed to be, art full of meaning, and so I stayed in this phase for a while because I thought I had everything under control. I was blindsided by one achievement, unable to see how forced meaning was not at all the same as the natural meaning my work eventually came to gain. After a few months of grade 10, with the help of my classmates, Mr. Very and Mr. Novak, I slowly started to realize that not all of my art needed meaning. This is where I see my transition into phase 3, meaning or no meaning. I began making work beyond my assignments and filling up my sketchbooks again. I felt like I had been freed and that my creativity was set loose, but even with all this open space, I still felt stuck. The assignments also had less structure, so I had free range to do what I wanted, but that meant I had to decide what to do. Grade 10 is the time to start experimenting and find your style for portfolio day, or at least that's how I saw it, but I was still struggling to balance having meaning versus no meaning in my work. In some ways, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff or at a very important crossroad. I didn't know which way to go and what to focus on. In the places where I did try to find meaning, I focused on my emotions. That seemed like a good place to start, but I ended up trying to control my emotions. After some trial and error, literally and figuratively, it ended up being extremely unsuccessful. I had the idea to represent my emotions with an upside-down hanging jar of water. I never completed this because the water didn't do what I wanted it to, and that made me very frustrated. This is how I learned that I like to be in control. Taking that knowledge, I incorporated it into my art and made this. A representation of what I wanted, but something I could not have because I know it is not good to try to control everything in my life. This was the first work I made that had meaning that wasn't forced and came naturally through its process, making it more meaningful. The next phase is what I like to call the chaotic phase. This is where I started making a bunch of things at once, trying to find my niche. The phase ranges from the end of grade 10 to the beginning of grade 11, stretching over summer. During my summers, I tend to try to forget about school, but with the ever-looming portfolio day, I realized I needed to at least make some stuff so that by grade 11, I had a solid idea of what I was doing. I would jump from art style to art style, some with statements and some more as hobbies. Here are just a few of the things I would make. Watercolor, some photography, another watercolor, hair sewed into paper, more photography, sewing, photography, watercolor, digital art, and finally photography again. As you can see, there is a variety of things, which isn't bad, but I wanted to have a cohesive, connective body of work, and I wasn't seeing strong enough connections between these works. Having a coherent body of work would allow me to truly believe and accept that I am an actual artist and take my own work seriously. The way I was making work at this time made me feel like a little kid running around an ice cream shop wanting to try every flavor. I felt naive and unprofessional. The chaotic phase did not last long, and soon things started coming together for me. Ironically, though, this is where the phase timing gets a little messed up. I started focusing my work more and diving deeper into my life and myself to produce the work, and I eventually ended up here, with hair. But before I get into the details of my work now, I'm going to jump back to mid-grade 10 to the first work I made from my hair. I have a love-hate relationship with the art assignments I was given. I like clear structure, but at the same time freedom to do what I want. I was given both of these things, yet somehow my brain still found a way to dislike it, even though I also managed to almost always come up with a creative way to fulfill the assignment. I created what I like to call loopholes, but really they are just creative interpretations of what I was told to do. I just like the word loophole. One of these loopholes was for an assignment called Birth to Now, where we had to represent ourselves and our life from birth to that moment. I spent a few days mulling over what to create. Should I do images of my life, a painting, drawing? No, I found these ideas too basic and simple, and I wanted to think outside the box, which is also what I've constantly been encouraged to do at ESA. So the idea I came up with was hair. Hair contains my DNA is me, it has been with me and is me from my birth to now. Ta-da! I thought it was an amazing way to approach this prompt, so I made a double helix out of hair. The double helix emphasizing the DNA aspect, and so this became the first ever work of mine that uses hair. This all happened during my meaning or no meaning phase, so after this I went back and forth working on other projects. I also started experimenting with hair as a medium because I like to do things that keep both my hands busy and constantly moving, something that painting or sketching doesn't do for me. Hair was a great way to fill that gap. After making some experimental jewelry pieces out of my hair, I started considering how well I could commit to using hair as my main medium. At the time, I was very hesitant and torn because one half of me thought, wow, this is so cool, you could do amazing things with this, but the other half was thinking, no way, that's too weird. Hair is something you grow from your body and you're going to turn that into art pieces? You're crazy. I would have stayed like this and gone back and forth with my mind bickering for a while, only doing small, half-hearted experimental works because one half of my brain was embarrassed by the other. But then COVID-19 and the global pandemic hit. Quarantine really did a 180 on my entire art and school mindset. I gave myself a quarantine haircut, and it wasn't that bad. I actually saved the hair and put it in a bag in my closet in case I ever needed it again. Turns out I did need it and just recently used that hair to make this. Okay, back to 2020. After bagging my hair, I became more focused on the fact that all our lives were about to change and that we weren't going back to school because of COVID. And so this is when I went into chaotic phase and stopped hair work for a while. The next two works I am about to show fall under my interrupting seventh phase. They are not hair work, but not all over the place like some of my others, and are a bit more put together. This work was my transition back into the school mindset. It took me a few months to create because I kept leaving it for weeks without touching it, and because cutting all those tiny holes was very time-consuming. This piece started out as a fun project, yet over time it has come to obtain a great deal of meaning. I made this at a time where I was struggling to organize the thoughts and ideas in my head. The work captures that for me because when I finally finished it, the noise in my head quieted. I enjoy fashion, and I did a lot of sewing over the summer to improve my skill. I could have made more works like this, but I didn't because it just didn't feel right, and because my thought process had moved past it. Throughout my time at ESA, I've tried to connect myself to art and the art that I make, but there was always something missing. As I took the time after finishing the shirt to assess where I was and what was missing, I came to realize that I'd constantly left out a huge part of my life, a huge part of me, my adoption. I was adopted as a baby from China, so the only memories I have of that time are from photographs, not my own memories. Because it was so long ago and I never really address it that much, I felt no need to incorporate it into my art or make it the center of my work. I was scared. I thought if I did that, it would change something about me or reveal something really scary. But since I was trying to form a connection with my work, I realized I couldn't do that without acknowledging and voicing all the aspects of myself. And so I overcame my fear and acknowledged it by making this, a recreation of my adoption ad photo. I mixed my liking for watercolor with this important aspect of my life, finally bringing it to the surface in my work. This opened up a barrier wall I had built within myself. Once I had acknowledged it in this very bold way, I found it easier to incorporate all of me into my work, which takes us to the last and final phase of my journey so far, where I am now. The new and evolved, no longer experimental hair works. Finally, I am at a place where I fully understand what I am doing. Mostly understand what I am doing, which is more than before. I've incorporated all aspects of me, not leaving a single part out, learned from many ups and downs that I shouldn't stress over meaning, and that through process and connection, the work will gain its own meaning. And so, through making this art, I have also come to learn the answer to the question, why do I make art? I make art as a way for me to connect myself to the world through relationships, understanding, and vulnerability. The ESA contemporary art community has taught me the value of community and learning to understand and connect with the people around me. During the pandemic, working on the Nielsen Park show for our class emphasized the value of community, connection, and vulnerability for me at a time where I found it hard to find any. So, where does hair fit in? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the first reason why I used it is because it is me, my DNA. That aspect of my hair, and hair in general, has become one of the biggest factors in my work. I am able to represent relationships in my life at their core. These works used both my hair and the hair of my parents. In this way, I am also featuring my adoption because we do not share DNA, yet the connection and relationships are just as strong and meaningful. Putting this work and myself on display for the world to see is very scary. Unlike sharing a painting with someone who I know is silently judging it, even if they say they aren't, with hair I not only feel the art being judged, but myself too, as if they can see right to my very core. This is a scary and surreal feeling and requires me to be extremely vulnerable through my work, something that so far no other medium has asked me to do. Vulnerability is so important to me because it is the thing that allows us to truly understand ourselves. Through vulnerability, we open up gateways and bridge connections that allow us deeper understandings of one another. It is a key aspect of the human condition, and it is through vulnerability that I have finally found a way to make art that captures so much meaning and so much of myself that I can share with the world. Without each little up and down of my art journey, I do not think I would have been able to get to this point. For now, I will continue to work with hair, but I know that I will constantly evolve until one day the hair no longer functions for me in this way, and I will have to find a new way to make art that captures my whole self.